a very, very, very warm welcome, and thank you for being not only with us today, but with us in other aspects of the Leaders' Council work as well. Really important to hear from you, to be able to reflect together on what we can do to improve matters in all kinds of areas. And just to say, I'm here, I'm willing. I have already taken up a number of issues that the Leaders' Council have raised with some effect. I mean, not dramatically change government policy. I wouldn't dream of claiming to be able to do that, but actually to genuinely influence where it's possible. And we've also organised meetings with ministers where that's been appropriate as well.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, any questions that you provided to us that we didn't get around to today, if you email those over, we can try and pass those on to David and get a response for you. And also over the past few months, we've been able to see some of you in person, which has been fantastic. And we will be doing more coffee mornings and other in-person events over the coming months. So do look out for those. But we'll get into the first section now about supporting businesses. A number of you have asked about how the government can better support businesses, and there were some very interesting solutions put forward. So I'll put run some of these by you, David. Sandra Foster believes that business rates for small businesses should be completely waived. John Mestitz believes that many employment regulations should be removed. He says if we're facing a recruitment crisis, why not make it easier to recruit? And Paul Newsham is concerned that the current economic growth has been stimulated by huge injections of new cash, but that this isn't something that can be sustained long term. So taking these points into account, what happens after the Treasury stops pumping out money? And do we need to think about cutting employment regulations and or getting rid of business rates for small companies?
Okay, I think business rates is the big bugbear for very many small businesses, not least because of the question you've already posed, Craig, which is the juxtaposition of online business and those who are actually having a physical presence. And this has really got to be sorted. I mean, there has been agreement, of course, to introduce at least a small tax in relation to online, but it is very small and it's not satisfactorily dealing with the issue. So there needs to be a full review of the whole rating and charging system. What we can't do is just ask government to shift it further onto corporation tax, because they're already raising corporation tax for larger business, medium and larger businesses anyway, and small businesses are the ones who genuinely do pay it. I mean, this is one of the twists here, isn't it? Business rate and corporation tax paid by small businesses, very large multinational global businesses get away with both. So we've got to have a review. It's fair that business should pay a contribution, but it's got to be on the basis of agreed turnover. It's got to be on what is affordable, and it's got to be fair between different businesses. We're miles off that yet. I hope that there will be a real agreement, not just to patch it up. And in the meantime, I think for very small businesses, lifting the business rate and taking it on to other areas of government fundraising would make sense. I'm not so sure about employment rights. There are some bureaucratic obstacles and difficulties and delays that are built in to the system. I should know because I now employ somebody direct myself from my own income. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do most of the things that I'm still doing. And I know what a challenge that can be. But it's not the big employment rights, it's the little things that get in the way of being able to move swiftly and easily, and to take somebody on and test whether they're up to it, and balancing the right of somebody not to be exploited with the sensible process of encouraging people to take people on. That's where we've got to get to. I'm surprised, if I'm honest, that we've done as well as we have since the furlough scheme finished in terms of keeping people in jobs. They're not always well paid and they don't always have progression. And we know at the moment we've got major problems with recruiting in particular areas. But it has been a surprise. And I think it's because the economy is bouncing back better than we anticipated. And let's hope that is the case. What was the third point, Craig? I've dealt with employment rights and business rates.
The third was on that note of the economy bouncing back.
Bouncing back, yeah. I think that the government now are relying on consumer spending rising substantially. And of course, the balance there is that with increased national insurance charges and with other pressures in terms of inflation, this is not going to be easy. So, I mean, the Bank of England are quite optimistic, but I think that the early new year will be the real test.
Yeah, and I think the concern of Paul Newsham, when the people who asked the questions, was that, yes, there has been strong growth and the economy seems to be doing relatively well, but is that because, in a large part, because of the huge injections of new cash into the economy, and it's not something that can be...
Well, the cash, certainly from furlough and in some cases the grants, kept the economy going. I think there's no doubt whatsoever, even though there has been some incidents of fraud and what have you, that actually did work and it was necessary. I think the problem now is to sustain that in a way that actually doesn't undermine investment in productivity. The government spending on capital will kick in the next 12 months, but as we all know, the time lag is enormous. So they are relying very heavily on consumer spend, and that is a fickle area, as all of those online will know.
Yeah, definitely. And a related point is from Bruce Hazel, who wonders if the benefits of leaving the EU will outweigh the cost. But without getting too much into that and reopening,
let's not open the Pandora's box. I mean, the Office for Budget Responsibility said that we've probably lost 4%. That's been balanced by 2%. So we've probably lost about 2% of GDP so far. I think it's hit particular companies and industries much worse than others, both in terms of those who are involved in export, but also because of the bureaucratic nature of the form filling and the clearance that you need for export. So those who are not exporting will have felt little of this. Those who are felt quite a big hit.
Yeah, and on that, just regardless of whether the benefits will outweigh the cost, one of the arguments made by Boris Johnson, among others, was that Brexit would give the UK government more freedom to act and to take its own decisions. So should, given the situation we're facing with COVID, should there not be more sort of radical decisions taken from the government, more things?
Well, I think there's general acknowledgement right across the political sphere that we haven't actually started to use, quotes, freedoms in the way that was expected, but that's partly because of the built-in contradictions that we're living in. For instance, you might actually want to reduce VAT in particular areas. Say you reduce VAT to enable people to pay their energy bills, you'd immediately be accused of undermining what we're coming to in a moment or two's time, Craig, which is the climate change challenges that were spelt out at COP26. So you find yourself, that was true, of course, of freezing fuel duty. Fuel charges have gone up enormously, as people who are drivers will know. It's exponential. These contradictions are not going to be swept away either with or without our presence in Europe. They're built into the very big challenges that politicians are having to grapple with at the moment. I do have some sympathy with the government on this one, because whichever step you take, you find you've dropped yourself in another mire.
Yes, and as you will know all too well, the government is all about balancing and competing, pressures and getting everything right as best you can. Right, so the poll that we asked, that we launched earlier, saying what measures, if any, should the government take to level the playing field between bricks and mortar businesses and online businesses. The options were to scrap business rates, introduce an online-only sales tax, to do both of the above, and to do neither of the above. Well, only 8% of people thought we should do neither of the above, so there's quite a strong consensus for some sort of action, and of those three, it was a complete even split of a third each saying scrap business rates, third saying introduce an online-only sales tax, and a third saying both of the above. So they're all options for the government to consider, and yeah, I guess we'll see in due course if they will go down that route. But we'll move on now to the second topic, which is on the government's climate policy. While we're doing that, we will also launch the second poll, which is related to the environment and the climate. We'll deal with that at the end. And also after this, we will take some questions from you. So do add any questions you have in the Q&A. We normally get loads and then don't have time to deal with them. We've only got one so far, so if you do get a question in, there's quite a good chance it'll be answered. So let's see. But part two, is about the climate. Following on from COP26, we've had a few questions, and all of them seem to relate to the difficulties business will face and the likelihood of the government being unable to hit its targets. So there didn't seem to be a huge wave of positivity around the strategy set out. So, for instance, Nigel Watson cites research sponsored by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy that says it will cost between £6,000 and £12,000 per household for the government to hit its targets. And Sandra Wiggins believes that the aim of moving to net zero is yet another huge weight to place on businesses in the wake of the pandemic. And then Mark Nind has actually said that some of the measures, such as the move to electric cars, may actually do more harm than good. That's from Mark Nind.
Well, I have a lot of sympathy, not because I'm a climate change denier, because I'm not, but I think the timescales we're trying to work to and the complexity of what we're asking people to put up with is just enormous. So what's affecting individuals and households is also affecting business. And I don't think the preparedness exists at the moment to make that possible. We've got the unholy combination of a massive worldwide hike in traditional fuels, and we've seen that, and the geopolitics of Russia and the gas pipeline and all of that, with pressure to move over to electricity, which has already risen in price, I think in the last 3 months by 15%. So we're talking about a big hit, and it goes from heating all the way through to where people are using electricity for production purposes. And I think we've got to get real. Firstly, in terms of the timescale, and people don't like me saying this, but I think that we've got to determine what we can do by 2030 and what will take the following 20 years to actually achieve. Secondly, we've got to actually find, through the science, an alternative to simply scrapping things. The idea that we're going to scrap 25 million gas boilers, which obviously affects business as well as domestic, is cloud cuckoo land. So we do need to work out how hydrogen, or a mix to begin with of hydrogen and fossil fuel, natural gas, can work to try and help people through that so that we have a sensible transition. I think my wife and I have a hybrid car. We have solar panels and we recycle massively. That's down to her, not down to me. We're making our contribution, but we're lucky we've got the resource to do it, to put in the solar panels, to have the car, and to be able to afford to recharge it. Now, I'm not sure about that last point about electric cars. I think the problem will be vamping up electricity supply at a level that people can afford, and having charging points that are creative, to say the least, because for many businesses, having multiple points at the point where you need them is not going to be feasible. For people in high-rise buildings, office blocks, and as well as apartments, that is going to be a major challenge. We've not even got off stage one. So what we need, I think, Craig, and I would be very grateful if people would think about this themselves, because this is going to have to be a joint venture, is how can we come up with solutions? How can those online today think of things that would be genuinely helpful, that we can feed in collectively, not as individual items, but maybe collect some of those through the Leaders' Council with ideas as to how we might contribute to make this work? Because otherwise, my biggest fear is a massive right-wing backlash where people are so cheesed off with what they're being asked to do and the pain they're expecting to carry, that they'll revolt against the very measures we need to take to protect the climate. And that would be a lose-lose in both respects.
Right. No, yes. Just before we carry on with the conversation, just had a few people mentioning that the sound, there's a bit of a sound issue, but it seems from reading the comments that this is if you're watching via Eventbrite. I think the people watching via Zoom aren't having those issues. So if you are on Eventbrite and you're having issues with the sound or the picture, maybe try and log in through Zoom instead, and that might improve things. And that's what some of the people have said in the comments. But to take it back to the climate issues, what you've said, David, seems to broadly reflect a lot of the comments that we've been getting, a lot of the questions that we had related to this issue. I don't think we won't get into the issue of climate change itself. And I think nobody we've heard from has denied that there is an issue there. But it is about the burden this is going to put on businesses, and ultimately the government needs businesses on side. They need to feel that they're invested in this and that they are part of a plan, or they can do things that are feasible. Recently, every single business in the country has had to massively overhaul how they do things in the face of COVID, at significant cost in a lot of cases, and to now give them quite a fuzzy plan with pretty high targets, and just expect them to be able to again radically reform and change their businesses. It seems like that's something that's a bit too much to ask for a number of businesses, particularly when there are lots of ways in which being greener and more environmentally sustainable can benefit businesses as well, and that maybe is something the government needs to focus on.
Bottom up, I would say, I think we've got to work out much more locally what's feasible to do, how we can do it in partnership together, where the wins are, because the danger at the moment is that it all looks like great pain and cost, and we've got to identify where there'll be some quick wins that will actually make people feel this is a journey that they're prepared to go on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. One last point is that, obviously there's a balance, and obviously this is a long-term plan, but how does it tally with you that a government can set a target and set a plan for 2050, and they're then tying the hands of future governments? And is it just something that a prime minister today can do, and he knows that he really isn't going to be the one that's going to be having to answer?
Well, he can do it because there's political consensus about the requirement to do it. If there was a serious political party, and there might well be down the line, that actually was opposed to this, I think we'd be in a different ball game. So this is about practicalities, doability, bottom up rather than just top down, and how we look for those wins. For instance, the way we've invested in the creation of the vaccines, not just us here, but across the world, what a terrific example. That kind of creativity and expertise needs to be applied to solutions that don't cause people the grief that they're being offered at the moment. In other words, how do we do things in an entirely different way, but without so much of the agony, the pain, and above all, the massive cost burden on business and individuals? Yeah,
and I think we won't get into the potential ways that can be done, but I think they are out there. I think that there are creative solutions there and reasons for optimism. On the poll that we did, it was asking if the government's environmental policies will benefit or hinder small and medium-sized organisations. 31% said they would benefit them, and 69% said they would hinder. So that gives you an idea of where businesses roughly sit on this at the moment. We now will have some of the questions from the audience. We'll try and respond to these as quickly as we can, and then move on to the third part. We've had some interesting questions coming in. To stick on the COP26 subject for a minute, Gabriel Dunaka asked if you agree with the comments of the Bahamas leader that the outcomes of COP26 are just fancy words that don't seem to have any teeth in them. Would you agree with that?
I actually thought that, this will surprise you, I actually thought that the outcome, particularly with the side deals that were done, was better than I expected, and I didn't think that the blah, blah, blah was very helpful. Small steps, some progress has to be applauded, to be honest. And the things that have been done alongside COP26, including by Mark Carney, including in terms of agreements on other forms of emission, actually really important. Okay, good. Yeah, good. And again, more positivity, because I think there is a lot of positivity to be had in this topic. Let's go for a question from Vincent Page, just saying, while the COVID cases continue to rise and advice is issued daily, do the government have any plans to assist small companies as the public seem to stay away from businesses the more the advice is issued? No, I don't think they do. I think Rishi Sunak said to Boris Johnson, enough is enough, and now it's down to warm words and encouragement for people to continue to take sensible steps, but to go out and live their lives. I'm, as we've discussed on previous occasions, Craig, I'm a bit of a libertarian on this. I do actually think that we should be brave and we should encourage people, whilst not doing daft things and trying to protect both themselves and others around them, to actually get back and live their lives. And if we don't treat this now as a nasty flu rather than a pandemic that's going to wipe out our economy and our lives, then I'm afraid we'll be back to square one. What's happened in Europe is not encouraging, but I think that's more to do with vaccine penetration, vaccine levels, and a delay in terms of comparative timings with us. I hope I'm right.
Sure. Yes. I hope so. You've always taken that stance. And I mean, on that, then, do you think the government should stop? Should stop it, even discussing COVID as much as they are, and try and move on?
Well, they're being accused of not having sufficient press conferences. God help us, we had enough of them in terms of warnings. Some of the scientists think that they're being less robust than they should be. I don't. I actually think that we need to address the big issues around us and get on with life. And I may upset people in saying that, but I just think we should.
No, sure. It's not a position that you've hidden from throughout this. So
I think there's a lot of work still to be done at a very local level with ambassadors and the public health people. Because in my own city, we've still only got 3/4 double vaccinated, and that's not good enough. We should be 90% double vaccinated. So we're still some way to go to actually fulfill our basic objectives. And we all can play a part in encouraging people. I'm constantly upsetting people, including taxi drivers who tell me they're not going to have their booster jab. And I'm saying, well, I won't travel in your taxi if I knew you hadn't taken the opportunity. So, it's a two-edged sword, this. We just got to encourage everybody to act with a bit of nous.
Yeah, well, I guess with those two positions, you've managed to annoy a lot of people on different sides. So, well done. But okay, so let's take some other questions. Another one on the climate change. Steve Boyle asks, can we be a global exporting force and also achieve our responsibility?
Yes, we can. And that's where I'd like government to really support the best of the initiatives, including with capital funding, because it will be worth it. There'll be a return. It's not throwing money away. It's not a waste. It's actually something that where you invest, you get a big return, and the country as a whole do.
Yeah, great. And a question from Keith Bettridge. I think you've already kind of addressed, just making the point. I think that the more the government curtails oil and gas, which is probably something we do need to do in the long term, but that is going to harm businesses and ordinary people.
Well, I would have a set out a time scale for when we don't give licenses for any further gas and oil exploration and production, rather than saying we shouldn't do it now, because we're clearly going to need, I'm afraid, gas and oil for some years to come. And the idea that OPEC can have us over literally, terrible pun, over a barrel, is ridiculous. Now, the international community led by the Americans have actually acknowledged that over the last fortnight and have taken some steps. But you hear this all the time, don't you? You mustn't allow the license for another oil or gas field off the north of Scotland. Well, we're going to need it for the time being. And if we push prices up to the point where people can't actually afford to invest in alternatives, we've got the worst of both worlds. So let's have a time scale over which this can be seen to work, and you can benchmark it and have stepping stones that people can understand and aren't frightened about.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what we should look to do. We've got two questions: a question on social care and the NHS, and one on education, which we'll leave for the moment because we are about to move on to those topics. A question from Adrian Hanrahan. I hope I'm getting this question right. It just says a number of EU governments subsidise energy costs for industry, but the UK doesn't because the EU Commissions would object. So he asked, where does that sit in terms of our...
Yeah, I think what I said earlier applies here, that we could actually subsidise, we could eliminate any remaining VAT on energy, but actually that would fly in the face of what we've agreed to do in terms of trying to get people to shift their energy usage, as well as the type of energy that they use. And I think we'll see now we won't see it until Macron's presidential election over in the spring. But in Germany, the coalition government, which of course includes the Greens, have agreed quite a radical programme of eliminating some of their subsidies and their fossil fuel use, although they're from a start way back from us, aren't they? I mean, they're talking about eliminating their usage of coal. Well, we're well down the line on that. We hardly produce any coal anymore.
Yeah, and perhaps that is something that, in terms of where we are in relation to other countries and the steps that we have taken, perhaps there should be more of a sense of us, congratulating ourselves for how far we have come, and then using that as a steer to...
I think so. We've done, lots of disagreements with the coalition and then the government over the last 11 years. But actually, in terms of renewables, we're not doing too badly.
Yeah, certainly when you look at it compared to other... Yeah. Okay, we'll now move on to the fourth part, which is about education. Obviously, it's always a topic of particular interest to you as a former education secretary and a qualified teacher. We'll begin with what I'm sure you'll agree is an outstanding question from Dr. Abide Zenenga. Ofsted, it relates to Ofsted and the fact that they've said that they will be, they're planning to halve the number of schools that are graded as outstanding. The logic is that too many schools have been given this rating and that it's losing its value, but it does of course mean that a lot of schools are going to seem like they've been downgraded, even though the education they're providing won't have changed at all. So what's your...
Well, they haven't put this very well, have they? I mean, there is a very good case for speeding up the reassessment of schools that in some cases have had 10 years of being rated very highly, but without a further inspection. And there's a very good argument for now inspecting those schools and reassessing. I don't think there's any argument whatsoever for having targets about whether people reach the benchmark or not, because either they do or they don't. And we shouldn't presume that schools that were outstanding have all suddenly fallen out into need improvement or even good. So I think it's a very silly way of presenting something that is in itself the right thing to do, which is to re-inspect and to do so on a much more rigorous timescale. I hope that helps. I think I can't see anybody. Well, maybe there may be people online who would disagree with that, but I can't see how we can disagree. We just want a good assessment that we can rely on and is a reliable guide of one school as opposed to another.
Yes, I do remember a time when David Cameron was Prime Minister, and he, pretty much any time he appeared at Prime Minister's Questions, he'd always say X number of more kids in good or outstanding schools. That seemed to be their target was to get more schools to have these ratings, and now pointed out that too many schools have them. We're now going to try.
It's because they've left them so long. If you get a school up to outstanding and you leave it, it remains outstanding. You can then tick box that you've got a lot more children going to schools that are outstanding, which is why you sensibly have to keep going back to them, because they coast. We used to call it coasting, where they're so complacent that they think they're fine, and actually the world's moved on.
Yes, and just very short comment from Pam McConnell, which might speak for a number of teachers, saying that Ofsted is how to kick people when they're down.
It's always been a problem, and it was when I was there, that Ofsted's whole raison d'etre was to pick out what wasn't working rather than celebrate what was. And I used to say to them, you've got to publish good practice. Don't just publish where things have gone wrong, because we need to spread best practice and celebrate where schools are doing really well and where they're seeking improvement to help. We need, there's got to be mechanisms to support rather than knock, and you can't just leave it to multi-academy trusts.
Yeah. To another question that we've got on education from Nigel Atwood, saying that children are being let down by the poor systems and lack of financial support within the sector. Mr. Simpson, I don't know his first name, Mr. Simpson from Arundel Church of England School, asks, what's the one thing you would change if you could only change one about our education system? So do schools need more money, and what needs to change in the sector?
Well, forgive me for smiling, but the government itself have acknowledged that their funding proposals for the next 3 years will take schools back to the funding levels in real terms of 2010. They've said it, not me. You just draw your own conclusion from that. The one thing I would do, I would actually provide from the Department for Education more sensible, supportive guidance on the way in which they expect schools to bring about rapid improvement and change. And you can do that because we set up a standards and effectiveness unit, which did just that. It collected what was working best across the world as well as in the UK and tried to cascade that down into the school population. And the literacy and numeracy hours did work, and there was a dramatic improvement in primary in particular. The second thing I would do, by the way, is to do away with norm referencing and grade boundaries. I just think that the way in which we assess pupils now is crazy. And it means that, depending on which year you're in and which school you're in, you get a different outcome, because with the grade boundaries and the norm referencing, the results are spread in a way that is calculated to balance, not within a school, not within the results that they've achieved, but across the board. And you could end up with a pupil that in 1 year would have got level 4 at GCSE, getting level 2 because of the way in which that spread takes place. Sorry for those who are not in the education system. It's mind-blowingly complicated, but it's very unfair.
Yes, it certainly does. Does seem to be very unfair, and hopefully that's something sort out as soon as possible. Another issue related to education comes from Victoria Adams. We've not really talked about COVID very much in this call, and that's partly deliberately because a lot of our other calls have been very much taken up by it. But Victoria Adams owns 2 small children's nurseries and has seen a drop in children attending as a direct result of the pandemic. She worries that early years nurseries are going to end up closing because they won't be feasible as businesses, and also just in general with fewer children attending nurseries, this is going to have a knock-on effect on their earning development.
I've got a lot of sympathy. My wife's 2-year-old grandson, who's a delight, goes to nursery 2 days a week, and it's been a matter of encouraging parents to have the confidence to do that and to support the nurseries who have taken great steps when things happen to be able to do so in a rational and sensible way, so that you close one of the parts of the unit rather than the whole, that you encourage parents to act, not to presume because they've got a runny nose that they've automatically got COVID, and to understand that small children are least likely to be affected by it. And I think that could be done better at public health level and through the local authority at each area, to just say you've got little to worry about and a lot to gain, and what you lose by not having your child socializing is enormous. And I know that Margaret's grandson James has come on leaps and bounds because of his time at a fantastic nursery in my own city of Sheffield. So you're entirely right, Victoria.
Yeah, and then just to back that up, we've got Carol Goodchild making the point that children who spent 80% of their schooling in poverty were apparently 22 and a half months behind non-disadvantaged pupils anyway. So obviously that's been exacerbated by COVID. And I think the reality is we're going to be seeing the knock-on effects of children missing education for years to come, and that will be disproportionately the case with poorer children. So it's going to be a problem for a number of years.
Spot on.
We're going to have to move on now to the final section, which is about care. But I will share we are sharing the poll results. The question we asked was, is education across the UK providing learners with the skills they need to effectively enter the workplace? Only 14% said yes, so 86% think that it isn't providing learners with the skills.
Maybe we should come back to that on another session, because there's a big area of post-16 and skills. I've been taking part in the debate because the bill that's just gone from the Lords to the Commons was initiated in the Lords. We've done a lot of work on this. Obviously, the implementation of T-levels focused, which is a very focused and narrowly approached, but high quality qualification that the government are supporting and bringing in, I think needs to be complemented by improvements and re-emphasising the importance of BTEC National Diploma, which I know from long experience, if it's taught well and is probably put together, is a really important qualification for business alongside A-levels and T-levels for the future. The government have backed off immediate demolition of BTEC National Diploma, maybe something to come back to at a later date.
Yes, I think it's definitely something we should do. So we'll move on to the final part, which is about care, but it also relates to small businesses in general. So Anthony Lowe says that social care is a breaking point. And most people in his sector seem to agree, certainly judging by the comments and questions we've had. He said that there's no way for small social businesses to get their voice heard when it comes to influencing decision makers. So let's take that question first. If you have a question on care, because it applies not just to care, but to other sectors more widely. How do we ensure small businesses get their voice heard?
This is something that you and I, Craig, have discussed in terms of the future of the Leaders' Council, how we can help people to partner together, to link together, to provide a cooperative voice together, because small business isolated on their own will not have their voice heard. And whilst there are organisations, obviously the Small Business Federation, I think that in a sectoral sense, if we could find a way of using the Leaders' Council as a conduit for being able to do that, we could give you a voice. And I think that's something that I'd like us to explore over the next couple of years in terms of making that possible, because the voice then can be a collective requirement, which can get to local government, can get to opinion formers, can get to central government. And whilst, we're all being very, very careful, including from the Lords where we're not paid, and it's very different to the Commons, and we're being very careful about advocacy and lobbying. We could ensure that the lobbying is done by the businesses themselves, not by lobbying on your behalf, if that makes sense. I'd like to facilitate what you could do rather than facilitating me getting myself in trouble.
Yes, absolutely. And this is something, particularly now that we are doing these in-person coffee mornings and bigger in-person events. We want Leaders' Council members to be able to get to know each other, to connect with each other, because if we can get 4 or 5 or hopefully more, but a number of Leaders' Council members behind one issue, to all attach their names to it, we can put together an open letter, try and get more signatures for that. Send that through you. There's all sorts of things we can do, and you might be one small business, you might not feel that your voice is heard, but if you connect with us on this issue, we can add a few more voices to it, and hopefully get your seat at the table, as it were. That's essentially what we really want the Leaders' Council to be and to grow into. So go with us on that.
It's creating a critical mass, and when you get that, you start to get some momentum.
Yes. And okay, so to go specifically to care now, and we've already asked the poll, or already launched this question in the poll, but Sophie Pilgrim has asked if it's time for a national care service in the same vein as the National Health Service, and Jeanette Phillips has asked if the Social Care Task Force is the way to revolutionise social care. So what are your thoughts on either a national care service or...
I'm in favour of a national care service, but decentralised. I mean, we need a national plan and clarity, and therefore the funding, but we need implementation at local level. Just to put, Sophie, just to let you know that I used to be chair of social services. We called it Family and Community Services in Sheffield. When, with a lot less resource than exists now, we had a phenomenal warden and home help service, and developed a variety of care support services that were linking domiciliary care with residential care, with meals, with laundry, with the ability of people to live independently around those units in their own home. They do exist today, but why not make that a major drive rather than the agonizing we've got at the moment about ensuring that we allow people to pass on large capital gains to their children. We're not debating the fundamentals of how to deliver care and to do it effectively, and that's a great shame. Second question, Craig, was...
It was related to a social care task force, and if that would be...
Yeah, well, look, any coming together and trying to collate the experience and advice is worthwhile. But the problem with task forces is that they just talk. They go on, don't they? And what you need is to very quickly pull together to collate what needs to be done, and then get on with it and provide the wherewithal and the support to do so. Your biggest problem clearly at the moment is recruitment and the consequent training. You just about train somebody, they go off to a job where they can earn more with much less aggro. And I think that will involve us all in thinking through, how do you develop progression within the care system so that people who start with what can often be quite a grind know that there's down the road in 5-10 years time, they'll have some idea that they can climb a ladder and that there will be progression in work. I think that's as important as how much more we pay when people first come into the service.
Yeah, and that is actually a crucial issue that we've had a lot of emails about is people saying that it's not just recruiting, it's retaining. Because I mean, when you work in care, it sets you up to work in a number of other industries, because it's a very hard job. And if you can do that, then the temptation's always going to be there to go off to another sector where perhaps you
almost need an in-work passport where you get accredited as you go along, and think this through, which exists in other services and in other parts of the health and care services as a whole.
Okay, that's certainly an interesting thing to consider. In terms of our poll, we do have 62% in favour of a national care service. But I guess the trouble with a question like that is it's what type of national care service?
What does it mean?
I'm sure there could be a great national care service, but there could also probably be a terrible one. So it would have to depend on actually. So I have a quick final question from Lee Healy. It relates to climate change again, but also he says it also relates to issues like migrant crisis and deforestation, melting ice, and a number of other issues. And obviously, it's particularly pertinent given what happened yesterday with the migrants on the crossing. He basically said if we gaze inwards and look out for ourselves, you can only see further problems ahead. Do we need to be taking a more outward-looking approach?
Well, we're going to have to. I think the tragedy yesterday illustrated that these issues are not going to go away, and actually, changing climate will accelerate people movements. So this has got to be tackled on a global and European-wide scale. I've done LBC, the Today programme, and Sky, so I'm a bit kind of washed out on what we should do. But basically, we've got to get an understanding right across the world that this isn't a problem for an individual country. We've got to get people to work together, of course, to share their intelligence and security and policing services, which we're not good at in terms of tackling the organised criminality, but actually organising to help people where they're at, rather than really saying, sorry, we're withdrawing from any support to you. And then, of course, they'll move. And then they'll move across Europe, and they'll end up on the French border. And it is now the new European border. So they're looking out to us as an outsider. And I've said this morning, I'll just finish on this. We've got to persuade the French and the Germans, the Dutch and the Belgians, that this is a common problem in which they solving our problem by resolving people coming across the channel in small boats is also beneficial to them, because otherwise, why would they? Why would we, if we had people piled up in Kent trying to get into France, why would we put ourselves out to actually facilitate them not being able to cross the channel? And when we can answer that question for the French, as we did 20 years ago when we closed the Sangatte camp, put intelligence and security and immigration onto French soil, and stopped a very large number of the migration across by the train, by the truck, by the larger ferries, that has been substantially reduced, and it's now switched to the small boats. And it sounds a woolly answer, but unless we get this to do this together, we're not going to solve the problem, and we'll end up with a problem. And the problem will be that people will be really frightened and spooked by what's happening. And I understand why they are. And it doesn't help to say that we've actually had fewer asylum seekers than we have in the past, and we take a lot less than France and Germany. I know that doesn't help people, but it's got to be part of the dialogue in having a sensible interchange and much greater diplomacy with the French and Germans, because otherwise, why would they? Why should they? It's not that. Essentially, we've got to persuade them that it's their problem as well as ours.
Yeah. Well, in terms of dialogue and working together, I think these are certainly things that we can take on ourselves as the Leaders Council as well. And we definitely need to make sure that we're not inward looking. And look, we discussed it earlier about getting businesses together and giving you a voice. That's what we exist to do. And we're going to try and do it. We'll end with a positive comment from Jeanette Phillips saying that we did it for the vaccines, we can do it again. Lord Blunkett is right. Just get on with it and come together, do the best that we
and thank you to all of you for being online. Thank you for being involved in whatever way with the Leaders Council. Thank you to Craig and Josh for facilitating this.
Yeah, and thank you, David. And thanks everybody for joining us. I think it's going to be a big year coming up for the Leaders Council, and a real chance for us to come together and have an impact. And as I think Josh has pointed out in the chat, we will be doing these meetups in person from January, and there'll be other events as well.
Yeah. Stay well, and stay confident.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks everybody, and see you shortly.
Thanks very much.